So guys, this is my first AAR, having completed the test play game for version 3, blended with the Actung Panzer for Southeast Asia and Pacific. And I think, really to start off with, and I'd echo very much what Mark says, and it's as much about getting the set correct, getting the terrain laid down, so that when you play the game, it's actually going to try and play out as you try and recreate that environment for the combat to take place over. In this case, it was a US Marine Corps force looking to break across and secure some bridgeheads and clear a very well determined Japanese force that was already in place. So I think, we're starting, as I said, with the terrain and the set. It was very important to make sure that this terrain was extremely close. If it had been a large piece of open ground, which you do get in certain areas of Southeast Asia around large rice paddies, then yeah, that's fine. But most of the combat actions, when you read through it, very little tank battles, a lot of close terrain, ambushes, and very short-range engagements leading to a lot of close combat. So really, getting that laid down and getting a lot of scattered terrain on the table are very important. This was interspersed by difficult ground, the small rivers, the rice paddies, which are difficult going, and then obviously that major river which requires either amphibious capability or the utility of the bridge. Very little direct line of sight again, which really restricts the utility of indirect fire, and a lot of heavy canopy, which actually does count as a bulletproof cover for things such as rockets. So again, that's very important when you're thinking about your dispositions, use of ground. This is not just something that you're going to go running straight across. I think it's also very important to note extensive use of the periscope, courtesy of Craig's models. And again, many times I would have looked at an engagement and said, yeah, that's line of sight, you're going to see it. But actually, when you get down with the periscope, just the sheer amount of scattered terrain, that really narrows it down. And on many occasions where I thought, okay, there's a long range shoot for a Sherman or a 150 self-propelled gun. No, you're getting no line of sight at all. So again, really important to try and get that accuracy down on the game and not just swag it. So I'm not really going into version 3 too much. People play version 3, people play version 4. But I would like to talk a little bit about how Actung Panzer really brings that version 3 very much more to life, adds a lot more depth and realism to the game. So first of all, with the battle deck itself. So the battle deck really, provided some interesting challenges throughout the game, whether that be loss of ammunition for a round, whether that be to tropical diseases preventing you to counterattack or in some cases move, whether that is actually indirect fire or ground attack aircraft, playing a card, friendly fire, and diverting that onto your own units, many times really did shake the game up and just adds to the sheer realism. I think one other big area is very much around pinning. This opportunity to go up to 3 levels of pinning, that really adds a different dimension to the game, because actually trying to get those pins off while you're still coming indirect and direct fire really restricts your opportunities. And on 1 or 2 occasions where US forces did get isolated, did get multiple pins on them, then the Japanese were able to start to overwhelm them. And this does hark back very much to not just the US and to a degree the other Western powers in World War II, but certainly what we saw in Vietnam, which was if the US forces can get a lot of direct and indirect firepower down onto the enemy positions, then it's only going to come out one way. However, if the enemy, whether that's Japanese or Viet Cong, can get inside indirect safe fire zones, or as they called it, grab them by the belt buckle, or get into a position where they've either spread US indirect and direct fire support that they can isolate units, then actually very quickly those forces can become overwhelmed. I think the other piece that's very nice with the Actung Panzer range is the single man teams and your opportunity to sort of select them and play them through. And both sides, those worked extremely well. For the Japanese, they took 2 snipers, and if you look back through my different phases of the game. One Japanese sniper held up a platoon plus some heavy weapons for about 4 rounds. And that's not that unrealistic until he can be spotted and either isolated with indirect fire or flanked and forcing him out of his position. For the Americans, very wise, they took a medic and they took Sergeant Barcelone with his heavy machine gun. Both of those proved, very invaluable to the US forces throughout the game. So it's a nice touch, and again, just adds that hero character or a specialist. And again, it's all about the depth. So what did I learn really about playing out this test play game? Well, first, let's look at it from the American side. I'm telling you now, every opportunity you get, dig in, dig in, dig in. And if you forget to do so, that's at your peril, whether you're prone for a banzai charge or indirect fire, because the Japanese 2-gun batteries are extremely potent, and they get a lot of them for their points. Second one is, the Buck Rogers units, they're great. They can put a lot of fire down, but they've got extremely short range, and they're extremely vulnerable. Again, before you're using those Buck Rogers, get them into position, get them dug in, and then start thinking about firing. Because if you fail your skill test and leave a smoke trail, then those Japanese guns will pick you up. The other one, it's obvious to say, but, keep your infantry and armour together. It's great to sort of drive that armour up the road, try and bounce a position, but those Stuarts are very vulnerable to, suicide attack, to 20mm anti-tank, to 70mm, 75, 47mm anti-tank guns. They don't have much armour on them. So really do think about that. Also, I guess for the Americans, be careful about getting overstretched. I tried an amphibious assault on one flank and trying to bounce a bridge on the other. That was great until I got to the Japanese home bank and I started to encounter, a lot more defence. With the medium tanks, with 3 infantry platoons and still a lot of indirect fire. The problem was that the Americans themselves, I just didn't have enough indirect fire. The cruisers are great, they'll rip up any dug-in position, regardless of where the Japanese are, bunkers, trench lines, whatever it might be. But they're expensive, and they're only one battery, and they're only a small template. Second to that, the aircraft's great, but the Japanese do have some decent defence around their indirect fire. So think very carefully about throwing lots of indirect fire ground attack aircraft in too early until you've neutralised some of those, trip away. Now looking at it from the Japanese perspective, they're not an easy force to play with. Their armour is not great, to be quite frank, but they do have some nice special rules. Hip shot is great, but really the depth for the Japanese does lie in their infantry. In this case, I didn't go for veterans, I went for trained, and actually their morale, given the size of units, they can hold on well. Probably one of the biggest benefits within the Japanese platoon is take those knee mortars. Take as many as you can get, because they really did add real fire support for the Japanese. The 20mm, they're a good little anti-tank weapon, great on soft skin, great for stewards, but once they start pushing against heavy army like Sherman's, life's getting a little bit challenging. I think the one that was really interesting and really brought home to me are the 2-gun batteries. Whether they are the 70mm, 75, 105, 150s, they are great, they are cheap. They can spread across the table well. The only problem being is they have their own dedicated observer, and therefore you have to be extremely careful about not exposing your observers and getting them knocked out too early on. A Japanese air part, the 0, it's not bad, but really you want to try and keep that and get it in on the things that you're going to have difficulty knocking out. So perhaps, try to hold it in reserve and go after those Shermans. We went for some other targets, but actually that was a bit of a waste. I got lots of equipment that can knock out Stuarts. The Buck Rogers, they're easy to knock out as well. So in conclusion, a great first test play. Now really it's knuckling down, getting the other armies put together, Chinese, Brits, Chindits, Indians, Australians, US Army, Filipinos. So a lot of work to be done before I can really start getting in to doing some of the campaigning. But I would say, big shout out to Mark, for all his support, inspiration, and assistance as I, try and really bring the Southeast Asia and Pacific campaign together. And again, another big thank you to Craig's models. Some of that's going to be coming on the table soon once my painter, James Harvey, gets to work on them, and hopefully we'll start to see them towards the back end of the year, early into next year. Thank you very much, guys. And I said the next one's going to be a complete session on the terrain that I've made for the table. Thanks for watching.